My name is Morky D Gorky, and one day I'm gonna be king of the Waagh.
This is the time known as the Great Pirate Era.
Come aboard and bring along all your hopes and dreams. Together we will find everything that we're looking for. One Piece.
Yes, that did just happen. Welcome back to the Forge of Sagas, and without any ado whatsoever, let's get on to making our Warboss for the Straw Hat Freebootas. For the base of our Warboss, we're going to be using the Ogrid Mimrodon from Warcry. Now there's a few things about here like the hooves and the tail that are going to have to go, but it's a nice solid base, got those big orky muscles, and it's a little bit larger than your average Warboss, making our boy ready to become King of the Waagh. So, to start, we're going to grab our clippers and snip away the tail. We want to do this as close to the base as possible, that way we don't have any odd protrusions when we go to make his pants. We're going to do the same thing for all of the hair on the arms and legs, because orcs in 40k aren't known for being real hairy. Once you've removed the majority of the hair with your clippers, you can come in with your knives and files and make it nice and smooth. On the top of the body, we have two main things that we need to remove, and the first of these is going to be this hair. We're going to come in with our clippers and snip this away, but make sure that you don't cut too deep into the model, otherwise you'll end up with a gap where you're trying to glue the model together, and that's just going to make assembly a pain. So, be careful, trim it away in small chunks, and remember that you can always clean things up with your knives and files. Next up, we're going to go in and remove the horns. Obviously, orcs also don't have horns, so this isn't going to fly. So, I came with my clippers and cut it off in small chunks, trying to free it from the orc body without damaging it or creating too many gaps that we'll have to go and fill in later. However, a little bit of damage is going to be unavoidable in the spot where the orc horn directly connects to the head, so try and be as careful as you can, but if you make a mistake, no worries, we're going to be working with green stuff later, so you can always take your extra and resculpt it a little bit to create the shape that you want. At this point, we're going to go ahead and assemble just the torso. We're going to leave the hooves on there for now, as it's going to help us when we try and glue on our replacement feet. Once you have it glued together, make sure that you come in with your knives and files again and clean up any rough edges. Here you can see where that mohawk used to be, it's not quite level and smooth, so I'm going to come in here and fix that before I move on to anything else. For the face, we're going to go ahead and attach that too, just to get it out of the way, and for this, instead of my clippers, I came in with my knife to cut off the horns. Again, these are going to get in the way of our straw hat, so they have to go. So, just take your knife and press it down to create a nice, smooth cut, making sure that you don't lose the ears, because, orcs do have ears, just not those massive horns. And once you're done with that, you can come in and just clean up a few of the rough edges with your knives and files. Now it's time to replace these hooves with some feet from the Storm Vermin kit. We've got this one, which has kind of an orky vibe, and it'll fit nicely on the left side, but for the right, I found this robot foot in the kit, which could kind of be like a type of peg leg. It's kind of a trope for pirates to have peg legs, so, I figured it would be fun. So I held it up to the model, and then came in with my knife and cut myself a little bit of a guideline. This gave me a nice reference point so that I could come in with my clippers and make sure that I didn't cut away too much. You can honestly cut a little bit under your guideline just to give yourself some wiggle room to make sure that you don't screw anything up. Make sure that you dry fit throughout the process just to make sure that you've got the leg positioned exactly how you want it. Once you're happy with how the two sides fit together, we're going to go ahead and add a pin to add some extra stability. For the hole in the leg, you're going to want to make sure you're absolutely dead center, as that's going to give you the most material so that you can drill a nice deep hole. Once your holes are drilled, we're going to put a piece of paper clip in there and then super glue the two components together. Here I'm using the mat to push the two components together so that I maintain the original pose. You don't want to remove both hooves before you do this step, because otherwise it'll be an absolute pain to get this model to stand up straight. Here you can see the model after the glue is set, and you can see when I put it down on the table it stands nice and flat. Don't worry about any of the gaps that you see here, because we're going to end up sculpting over them when we make his pants, so no one's going to know that they're there. Now that this is done, you can go ahead and snip off the other hoof and replace it with our little rat foot. Now it's time to move up the body and start working on the arms. For his power claw, I decided to use the claw from the Helldrake kit. It's nice, big, and imposing, and it looks really different than a lot of the other power claws we see in orc kits. Plus, let's face it, freebootas are the pinnacle of looting, so you can imagine him ripping this off a Helldrake that he'd killed in an earlier battle. while we can't give old Straw Hat Morky here the Gum Gum fruit, we can give him the next best thing, which is an Acme-style spring-loaded power claw. We're going to cut down a length of polystyrene rod and attach that to the base of the power claw, and then superglue on some 1mm florist wire that we're going to wrap around the polystyrene rod to give the impression of the spring. Make sure that you wind this nice and tight so that you don't have any gaps where you could see the polystyrene rod under the spring. Once we're done making our spring, we can go ahead and bulk out our arm with a little bit of armor. To create a fully enclosed gauntlet, I chose the top piece from the Stormfiend's kit and the bottom piece from the Helldrake kit. The two pieces lined up really nicely and left a few gaps where you could look in and see the spring. However, that spike is going to have to go, as well as this little nub that's on the inside of the armor. You can go ahead and clip both of those away. Now it's time to go ahead and attach the power claw to the Warboss's arm. I made myself a test incision the same way that I did for the peg leg earlier, and then came in and did an initial dry fit just to see what other changes I was going to have to make in order to get this power claw to sit nicely. I ended up making quite a few adjustments both to the arm and the power claw to make them fit nicely, but after a lot of trimming and dry fitting, eventually they came together very nicely. After this, I came in with one final dry fit to make sure all of the components would work and position exactly the way I wanted to, and then I glued them together using a drilled in pin for support. Now it's time to turn our attention to his custom Shuda, and for the base of that, we're going to take this Eldar Wraith Lord hand. It already comes with the trigger assembly, but it doesn't have any guns attached to it at the moment, so it gives us a really nice base to work off of. So we're going to come in and snip away the original hand, making sure that we don't damage this nice little armored gauntlet, and then we're going to make some minor adjustments with our knife until the pieces sit nicely together. For the main body of the Shuda, I decided to stick with the Eldar theme and use this scatter laser. It's a nice bulky body that I felt like I could attach a lot of other components to, and it fit really nicely with the existing trigger assembly and the crook in his arm. But this barrel is just a little bit too long and would be scraping the ground once I put him on the base. So we're going to go ahead and cut that off with our knife, leaving us a nice, smooth connection point to add some other weapons in the future. Initially, I decided to reattach the end of the barrel of the scatter laser to create this kind of snub scatter laser, but I ended up finding a better component for that later. Next, we're going to come in and remove all the large gemstones from the body of the scatter laser so that we can make room to attach even more Daca. The first bit of Daca I decided to add was this heavy stubber from the Scorpius Dune Rider kit. In a lot of the games that I've played, the heavy stubber has had this weird habit of picking wounds off of things it absolutely shouldn't, like demon primarchs and land raiders, so Morky D Gorky is definitely going to need one of these. This weapon doesn't really require any adjustments, so you can just glue it right on the side, making sure that the barrels are all pointed in generally the same direction. The scatter laser tip just wasn't working for me, so instead I went to the Helldrake mouth and clipped out the Hades autocannon. Felt this was just a little bit more orky. For even more Daca, I decided to take this weird little piece that comes in the Scorpius Dune Rider kit and this interesting gun from the Tech Priest Dominus kit and combine them together. Make sure you file both components flat so that you get a nice connection when you glue them together, and make sure that that little knob on the Tech Priest weapon is pointed out. However, I still don't think we've got quite enough Daca for the future King of the Waagh, so we're going to go ahead and grab this smoke launcher from a Rhino kit and mount it to the top of our scatter laser body. This could help us be what you see is what you get if you wanted to equip him with a combi rocket instead of a custom Shuda, because this could be the rocket launcher component. But wait, there's more! Yes, you can also equip a Warboss with the combi Scorcha. So I grabbed half of a combi flamer from the Chaos Rhino kit and clipped that flat so that I could glue it on the underside, because, you know, I like WYSIWYG, so he could have a combi rocket, could have a combi Scorcha, but it'll always be represented. However, since we're gluing this particular piece on the bottom of our custom Shuda, we want to make sure that it doesn't interfere with our trigger assembly. This is going to require a lot of dry fitting to do, but you want to make sure that this all sits together really nicely. There are some natural nooks, but a few minor adjustments are going to be made to make sure that it all fits together nicely. The last thing we need to make for our Warboss is some clothes, and we're going to sculpt those out of green stuff. I'd honestly never done this before, so I took a tip from a friend of mine who's a seamstress in real life, and cut myself some paper patterns that I could use to help create different components of the vest and pants that I was going to need. I spent a lot of time trimming these patterns to make sure they were exactly how I wanted them before I went to mix up my green stuff and make the clothes for real. There's not going to be a ton of footage of my sculpting process because I will freely admit that it was super amateurish and there are way better videos out there where you can learn to make all kinds of green stuff clothes. However, what I did in the basics is I used my silicone brush set and a lot of water to just help merge these pieces together and get them to sit on the model in exactly the way I wanted to. One technique I will point out is after I'd sculpted the pants on and gotten them where I wanted to, I came in with the tip of my brush and flared out the bottoms a little bit. This is going to give them a little bit more baggy feel and match them closer to the clothes that we see Luffy wearing in One Piece. I also used this technique to add some life to the vest. Not only did this allow me to create some separation between the body of the model and the cloth that I was sculpting, but it also let me create some interesting shapes where there might be a little bit of a breeze blowing and, rustling his vest that's creating this air of movement that I really liked. I took the leftover green stuff from the vest and the pants and used it to make this little strap that went around the custom shuta. I felt it was very orky and added to that cobbled together feel. We're going to go ahead and glue this piece in place now so that we can go ahead and sculpt the vest around it, so we make sure that we don't have any weird lines of movement where the vest is billowing in a way that would conflict with the custom shuta. I let the clothes set fully before I moved on, that way I couldn't mess them up, but now it's time to create that infamous straw hat. Once I'd rolled out my green stuff to the thickness that I wanted, I took this 28mm base, which was approximately the right size for the hat brim, and pushed it in to use it basically like a cookie cutter. It was a bit of a pain to get the green stuff out of it, which I didn't realize until after, but it gave me a nice size shape that I could work from. I went and did a bit of a dry fit here just to make sure that the brim would be the size that I wanted it to be before I moved on to creating the dome of the hat. For the dome, I took a ball of green stuff and pushed it into my mat in order to give it that nice half-sphere shape, and then I smoothed down the edges with my fingers. It took me a long time and a lot of different tries to get the proportion of hat dome to brim proper, but after, admittedly, a very long period of trial and error, I did eventually get it right. I then took my sculpting tools, a combination of my silicone brush set and the dental pick that you can see on the very right of the screen, to add a little bit of that straw texture throughout it. Once that was done, I slapped it on the head of my Warboss and left it to dry. I ended up overestimating the amount of green stuff I needed, so I had a bunch left over. So, we're going to take this and do a quick little bit of basing to add to the model. As kind of a thing I keep in the back of my head, I have all my armies delegated to planets so that I know how the basing structure works, and my orcs exist on a planet that I simply call Space Australia. It's where I put all the armies that don't fit into a nice scheme like Imperium or Chaos, so this is where my orcs, maybe a future Tyranid, Necron, or a Tau army would exist. So, I started carving in this little ancient ruin base, just some brickwork that might have existed from either the Necrons or a possible other human or Tau civilization that are working there now. But I ended up ditching that and using the same technique you see me using here to create this very cool Necron tier looking pattern. This is one of those things you don't have to do, but I feel like it just adds a little something extra to the model, and it means that I didn't have to waste this green stuff. I then covered any spaces not coated in green stuff with some of the Games Workshop texture paints to help blend the two together. I then added a few little rocks to help with basing, and painted him up. After a quick and fitting paint scheme, here we have Morky D. Gorky, future King of the Waagh and Captain of the Straw Hat Freebootas. While this Orktober project might be a little silly in concept, I had an absolute blast making it. If you guys enjoyed this video, give us a like and subscribe to the channel so that you can see every future addition to the Straw Hat Grand Waagh. If you have any suggestions for conversions or other builds you'd like to see me do on the channel, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching, happy Orktober, and I hope to see you again the next time we ignite the Forge of Sagas.